So we're going to talk about a subject you're probably familiar with. Yeah. You subsist on it. It's pizza. So, think about pizza. It's a commodity, right? How do you differentiate in a commodity business? It's the data, right? It's like what you can do with that compared to your competitors, I think really makes a difference because it is a commodity business. So you have to differentiate, and that's really driven by how you can leverage that asset called data, right? So we work with Dominos. They use our software. We're an open source platform for data management. We can go into that in detail later. But the thing I really like about Dominos, and I always say this, they're a technology company really that makes pizza. They do things that are they're bloody all the time. Look at them. They go out bleeding edge with all sorts of technologies, and you see that in their culture. You even see it in their commercials, right? You can order a pizza with an emoji. Who does that? Now, these guys do. I read an article the other day that they're doing, I think the next step is going to be voice rec, right, for ordering pizzas through voice recognition. Not only you just start talking, they know it's you. Say what you want, you get your pizza 30 minutes later or shorter or faster. There you go. So with that, I'll introduce Dan Djuric. He is the Vice President for their global information, the enterprise information management at Domino's. And Cliff works with Dan on his team around the enterprise information management and specifically on data integration. I think you'll really enjoy this. It's a perspective you never thought about a company that makes pizza. So thanks. Appreciate it.
Ready? Mm-hmm. First of all, thank you for having us. My name is Dan Djuric. This is Cliff Miller. We are here from Domino's. Hopefully, we're not going to talk to you guys about tools today. I think you've probably heard a lot about tools. We're going to talk about rules. We're going to talk to you about rules as to how we've leveraged data assets that we have to monetize those assets. Yeah, we use tools to do that. I think you've heard a lot about tools over the past couple of days. So we're going to take a different angle, a different approach. I hope that puts some things in perspective. My role at Domino's and Cliff's role as well is I get to wear two hats. I get to build the foundation infrastructure associated to delivering everything we do globally. I also get to work with people like Cliff who make me look good every day on ensuring that we onboard data into our organization and then basically transfer that data into an asset that we can monetize on. So with that, I'd like to talk to you about our vision. It's no secret. We are out to become number one in every neighborhood in the world. So we like domination, but we're also pretty humble when we make statements like that, right? But ultimately, our vision is to be the number one pizza company in the world and in every neighborhood. And our investment has really been in the technology space, the digital marketing space, in order to help us prolong that. So before we get started, legal stuff. I'm not going to ask you all to read this, but now you are all obligated to order pizza this evening as a result of this specific slide. So www.dominos.com. Let's talk about data anywhere, or Domino's Anywhere actually brings data everywhere. Anywhere, any platform you can think of, we have integrated into your watches, your TVs, your Alexa, your vehicle, multiple styles of vehicles, your phone, your tablet, any portable device you can think of, we are putting our ordering application into and/or our API platform. Why? Well, quite simply to understand the consumer, right? So yeah, we drive our product through tools and technologies, but ultimately our goal is to become number one. How do you become number one, right? You enable people to obtain what they desire quickly, with quality, and understand how to market and target them in future exchange, all right? The important part, I think, of big data, and something I think about a lot, and hopefully everyone else does, traditionally everyone starts with tools, right? So 3 years ago, if you did not do Hadoop, or maybe even 4 years ago, right? If you didn't do Hadoop, you weren't doing big data. And they were like synonymous items, right? It's like, oh, you gotta get some Hadoop, then you got big data. Well, I believe that there's many tools that can help you be successful, but ultimately I think that's starting to shift and change in terms of what you guys have seen, and ultimately now how analytics is being derived to tell stories or basically entice your consumer associated to the data assets that you own. First thing we did when we thought about our information management framework is we did something very odd. We went to talk to our business partner, right? Said, hey, how do you want to attract consumers? What attributes are important to you? And which conversations do you want to have? What dialogue do you want to have? You want to have a one-on-one relationship with your consumer. But more importantly, I'm not going to talk to you about tools. I'm not going to talk to you about technologies. I'm not going to talk to you about how my team built it. I'm really interested and focused on your business. So which conversations do you want to have? So traditionally you think, oh, we're going to focus over here on this part, right? We're going to capture all this data, and we're going to do some really cool, I'm going to use the word, Cliff, whiz-bangadry tied to the data, right? Something's going to happen when we're done. Quite honestly, we focused on the opposite side, right? We looked at how our CRM team was communicating. They're communicating on multiple channels to our consumer. Not only that, our consumer was exchanging with us, again, in many different ways, right? So not only did we have to understand the consumer and have that conversation effectively, we now have multiple channels that those consumers are coming into us on. So it's very important to understand the channel. It was important to understand the attributes or data assets in that channel, but it was also very important to understand how our digital marketing team was working directly with our consumer, modifying our brand, incorporating the change within our platforms, but ultimately, again, enticing, keeping you as a customer, making you feel relevant, making you feel loved, and quite honestly, make you feel really good about the investment that you just made within your Domino's pizza. All right? So ultimately, we thought if we understood the end result, let's work our way back to the beginning. Now let's talk about how we're capturing data. What systems do we have in place that are feeding data into our platform, right? We ultimately derive this, what we'll call data capture zone. The data capture zone, and this mantra of the single source of truth, I think is important. It's the lineage of, or the lifeblood of where our consumer starts, right? They come in on multiple platforms. How can I corral all of those interactions and ensure that I recognize them in a fashion that I can leverage them for a later use case, right? So now I start to begin to build my catalog. We've got over 13,500 stores worldwide, all right? Our responsibility from a consumer brand perspective is to understand what's happening in those 13,000 stores. Digitally, we are transacting well over 2,000 transactions per minute. These are digital transactions online that are feeding orders into my e-commerce platform to, in essence, first get the order right, second, ensure I'm delivering effectively to the consumer, third, start to build that loyalty and continue to have that consumer come back and see me, and then fourth, which is, I think, one of the most important things, begin the recognition process and start to master all the different aspects of how I see them. In essence, build that one golden record, which I think is a common theory you've hopefully heard about these past couple of days, but ultimately, how do I begin to understand Dan's household, right? I've got, my legal name's Djuric. My American name apparently is Dan Djuric, but that's okay. I've got a lot of different ways that I subscribe to services, right? What was important for us is we start to understand how the consumer is interacting, but more importantly, how their household and all of their channels are interacting with us as well, right? So ultimately, we start the organization process. Your data enrichment, triggers we tie to our consumers as we saw those orders and or those transactions coming in. Ultimately, unifying that customer, right? Cliff orders, I order, Cliff's wife, my girls, his kids, so on and so forth. They're all transacting on potentially different email addresses, different physical addresses, different devices, different consumer protocols, and quite honestly, Twitter, which to me is unbelievable, but you can tweet and pizza will show up, which I think my girls think that's a magic trick, literally. So from that perspective, it was really important for us to get this information aggregation algorithm built and really truly understand what does our consumer look like, right? It's easy when you write your own point of sale system. It's easy when you write your own e-commerce platform. It's difficult when you integrate with everyone else's channel, right? And how do we incorporate that integration, but more importantly, really refine our customer protocol. Second, we work diligently to control what I would call the shadow IT function in most organizations, right? There's IT, and then there's marketing, and then there's that blend of IT and marketing that I reference as shadow IT, right? Those are the people that find data and say, holy moly, man, I can go make this report, generate this KPI, and use this data to go do something with. But wholeheartedly, we could never get that lineage back to where's that from? And what's your definition of sales? And how does that interact with the channels that we're interacting with, right? So we had to corral our shadow IT organization and really work effectively with them and build a relationship. So my conversation with you today isn't about IT tools and technologies more than it is about building effective relationships, understanding your consumer, building those relationships in your organization that you can leverage to further invest in your information management framework. I think one of the investors, I don't know the gentleman that was sitting here, but he said it really well, which is understand how you want to leverage the assets that you're going to procure, understand how you can monetize those assets. I'm summarizing, but at least that's the message I walked away with, right? So it's working with our analytics team and really understanding, look, how are we going to build segmentation tied to the catalog of information that we have? What leads or insights do we know about our consumers and how they react and how they handle themselves in the marketplace? And more importantly, if you're a great consumer, how do I keep you being a great consumer and reward you effectively? All right? So the propensity of an upsell, how do we switch our site so demographics see one aspect of our site and subscribe one way, and they see another aspect of our site and subscribe another way? So really continuing to evolve and capture the data on building off relationships, quite honestly, right? So we're not even to the IT part yet, if anyone wonders what the hell is a guy doing up there, right? We are really talking about building effective relationships and how to monetize the assets that you have, right? There's a lot of work to be done, and there's a lot of tools that help you do that. But ultimately, that's where I think our journey began, and be interested to hear from some of you in terms of how your journey is evolving through that as well. Ultimately, what is also important to us is you start to look at, okay, we have the data, we're starting to build this stream of analytics. How do we take that a step further and build the KPIs for the remaining business so they can drive their business effectively, right? You look at consumer, and that's great. Well, we also have 20 different supply chain centers in North America, right? I'm selling to my franchisees off of that. They're ordering food. What type of conversation am I having with those consumers at that level? And how do I monetize on those assets that I'm receiving? Moreover, how do I help us drive our business better with the assets that we're receiving and building those KPIs, right? Again, I can't go up to my executive vice president of supply chain and say, man, I got this Power BI dashboard you should use, right? Those aren't the conversations we have with them, at least in the beginning, right? Ultimately, we're driving our platform into our CRM capability. If you've got a Domino's app, it's going to bother you this week. It's going to bother you last week. It's going to bother you the week before that. It's going to bother you the week going forward, right? Walk past one of our stores. Our beacon technology is going to reap out to your app and say, come get some stuff. I got a coupon for you, right? Log into our profile. We've got a profile digital space where we start to build the loyalty on consumers. So now I'm not only getting those orders, but now I'm starting to understand their ordering patterns and the rest of how they feed their family, right? I then do that in store. I turn my loyalty program into the store and say, hey, you can earn in store. Here's these free points if you give me your name and your address. Right? So now I'm getting very familiar with my consumer, but it's all driven through our digital marketing and IT relationship. Right? Working together to basically be successful, right? Ultimately, there's a big elephant in the room, right? But for us, we're leveraging, we've got kind of two lanes in terms of how we handle data. We've got the traditional enterprise data warehousing lane, which is your structured data environments, and then ultimately you tell yesterday's today. We also have this data fast lane where we're starting to integrate other technologies to enable us to get more real-time analytics as to how our organization is processing effectively. All right. getting to know our customer, I'll use words that have been thrown around for many, 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 many years, but ultimately those are very important words to us. Customer data integration, what we're doing with our data quality, and what type of data do we have on our customer and how are we leveraging that? And then ultimately mastering the data, right? So our single source of truth has really two very strategic patterns associated to them, right? Who's our customer? What are we doing with them? What type of enhancement data can I apply to them? And more importantly, now, who are they affiliated with? What store are they affiliated with? What are their ordering patterns? And ultimately, how can I household all of that activity? All right, I'll turn it over to Cliff, and he'll talk to you about where we got started.
Thanks, Dan.
Yep.
Hey, you hear me okay? Cool. So for the brave souls who are still here at 4:15 on a Friday, I'll try and err on the side of brevity and leave some time for Q&A at the end. So we'll get right to it. I've heard over my career an adage like, what got you here won't get you there. And so the story I want to tell you is where we started out from what we affectionately call our UCD or Unified Customer Database, and the journey that we took to get to where we're at now, because we're really on iteration 3. So, and I've been around for all 3 iterations. Where we started out was very much where we had been for the last 10 years. So we considered a household to be a customer, right? And so when you went and looked me up in our EDW, which you could do, I appeared 3 times, right? We're at my house, at my parents' place, and at work, right? So if you want to try and understand Cliff or my family from a holistic and longitudinal perspective, I was split 3 ways. So where we wanted to be was a much more holistic version of Cliff and anyone in my pizza occasion eating group. So in prior iterations of this, our legacy data matching was all based on households. We only had about 50 million known. They had to be standardized and cleansed and things like that. So there's a lot of rules around who we even householded at that point. And we weren't taking into account things, like Dan's talked about, profiles, email addresses, phone numbers. There's a whole host of information that we get because we have a wonderful POS and e-commerce platform that gives us all kinds of data very, very quickly, which I'm going to talk about in the...
POS is point of sale.
Yeah, sorry, point of sale. So,
it's Friday. I
yeah.
want to make sure we know that.
So we get a lot of data coming at us very quickly. So in the 3 V's of big data, right? So velocity, variety, and volume. We get a lot of stuff coming at us pretty quickly, and we weren't taking into account all of those pieces as we try to link you guys together. So there was no reverse phone lookup, no email lookup, no third-party enrichment. So we were just taking what we had and using very kind of stagnant rules around how we were going to classify you as a customer and then market to you, right? So that's really the end goal, as Dan described. It's not tech for tech's sake. That's not what we're about at Domino's. So the whiz-bangadry, that's out there, we're not into creating something just for the sake of creating it. It's got to drive business value. So that's kind of a background of where we started. And the story I want to tell you about where we went, how we got to where we're at, is more about mentality and focus. All right? So there's lots of tools, there's lots of tech behind this, but for us it was a lot about mentality and focus, and actually innovation. So I pulled this quote off of our friend Google. And I like this because of 2 things. It's Mahatma Gandhi. So he said, when you talk about something really innovative, first people ignore you, and then they laugh at you, and they fight you because they realize what's going on, but by then you've won. And so it wasn't that this is an internal fight at Domino's or we're laughing at each other, but it kind of can feel uncomfortable innovating in a way that you've never done before. Right? So for us, we had to wrap our brains around the fact that we weren't going to do the exact same thing that we've always done, because what got you here is not going to get you there. So I also threw in a little sports stuff for you guys because I love athletics. So this one from Wayne Gretzky, right? Everybody knows Wayne Gretzky. Okay, there's some hands. I'm a Red Wings fan, but so Wayne Gretzky, probably one of the greatest hockey players ever lived. they asked him, like, Wayne, why are you so great? And Wayne's response is, I skate to where the puck is going to be and not where it's been, right? So when we, in terms of our project, we had to think about where is that white space where we've not been yet. We have to redefine all of this. If we go down the same path we've been before, we're going to net out to the exact same place where we've got to. And that's our first iteration of this, basically saying 50 million households. It kind of nets out, right? So if we followed the exact same process we did before, we all looked at each other and thought, there wasn't a lot of lift on that. Well, we did the exact same thing that we did in the past. So you've got to start to think a little bit differently and be okay with that. And that risk is something that you've got to at least start to embrace a bit. And so I pulled one more from Wayne. This one was, you miss 100% of the shots that you don't take, right? And so my learning from that experience is that you've got to be comfortable taking some risks, but you don't want to do it in a really haphazard way. So at Domino's, we really strive to be a data-driven company. That's something that comes down from Patrick, our CEO, Kevin, our CIO, all of our leadership. We strive to be a data-driven company. So those gut reactions, those, we're going on what we feel, we really try not to do that. Sometimes that weighs into it a bit, but we really try to make data-driven decisions. So it's a bit of an art and a science, right? So you don't want to miss an opportunity, but you also don't want to spend time heading down a path that's going to get you nowhere. So when Dan talked about the business case and all those things that were up on the right-hand side of that information management slide, all that global CRM, it's where we started our conversations because that's where we wanted to get to. It's not about the tech. It's about that. It's actually, guys, it's about all of you in this room and your experience with our brand. That's where we wanted to be. So we had to figure out what risks we wanted to take and make sure that they were good, that they were calculated and smart risks. This slide I put in here because the other thing that I learned through this process is that data, and this is a Cliffism. Sorry, this is not Wayne Gretzky. Data can unlock innovation. And the reason I say that is because the things that we discovered through this endeavor, through this project, this initiative, were really, really, really telling when it came to understanding our own customer behavior and behavior patterns. So the part I like most on this slide, and I'll read it to you because it's kind of small, and this is back from 2013, and this was a federal agency that put this slide out, I'm pretty sure. Data is a resource, much like water or energy, and like any resource, data is nothing on its own. Rather, it is world-changing in how it's employed in human decision-making. So data for the sake of data is probably not going to get you where you want to be. Now, data for a business case, that's a whole different story, right? And it can be amazing. I mean, they've got other stuff up on here like, generating $3 trillion in additional revenue, reducing healthcare costs by 8%, which I would love to see personally, but so information for me, I think, is something that can be game-changing when you wrap your arms around it and really, really dive into it. So again, back to our customer journey, 3 V's of big data, right? You've got velocity, volume, and variety. When we consider what was going on with our customer, the variety was fairly well contained, right? So I've got an amazing e-commerce platform, I've got an amazing point of sale, and they're giving me all kinds of stuff about you all, about me, right? So that universe of attributes is fairly well known. Velocity and volume, for us, based on what Dan told you about our e-commerce traffic, are massive, right? Our online transactions are gargantuan. And we bet, without money, but we bet, how many orders per minute are we going to grow at our peak? Is it going to be 2,000? Is it going to eclipse 2,500? Where's that ceiling? Because when you start to get north of 50% of all of your business, domestically being online transactions, that's a ton of information. So our volume goes way up. The velocity is also extremely interesting to deal with. As I'm assuming we've got some folks in here who deal with information. These things are probably well known to you, but how fast that information is coming at you can prove challenging when you try to go take it through a series of car wash of events and say, okay, I'm going to take Cliff and I'm going to clean him up, and I'm going to then link him together, and then I'm going to survive and master him into one entity so that I can draw a pattern for Cliff all the way back through his order history. That challenge for us is one that's always going to be there. It's never going to go away. So in our third iteration of what we affectionately call UCD, that's one of the key things that we're going to go after, is figuring out how to do that more frequently, faster, and more effectively without losing any ground in terms of how much data we've got to process. And it can be challenging, right? Anybody who starts talking about, to me at this point, we talk about gigs like we used to talk about megs, right? And really, and we're almost to the point where we talk about terabytes like we used to talk about gigabytes, right? Petabytes will get to that point at some point, right? And the volumes will continue to grow, IoT, all these things that we talk about big data, it's all going to continue to grow, and you have to figure out how you're going to manage that and do it in a smart way. Here's a bit of a cautionary tale that I've got. We said be open to taking some risks, right? You're going to miss 100% of the shots you don't take. But I will also at least warn you, and you can do with this what you will, but I would avoid just stockpiling information for the sake of doing it, right? And you can. So if you listen to the folks who, and I have talked to us about Hadoop, or platforms like that, big data lakes, they get names like Data Swamp. I mean, and we all joke and we laugh and things like that, but we've all been there. You've seen data pile up, you've had to manage it, and then you're like, oh my Lord, what are we gonna do with this? Is anybody using it? I would suggest that when you think about those smart risks and the things that you wanna go after, just pass it through a filter of, do we really feel like there's some value here? And maybe you need to go do a proof of concept on it to figure out where you want to take it in. But we all can get into that point where we're going to have to, just bringing it in doesn't mean it's free. I mean, there may be some value in there. You may have, you mine it and figure that out. But you're going to store it. You're probably going to back it up somehow. Or if you're not backing it up, you're going to keep multiple redundant copies. You're going to manage it. And what that ends up doing is stealing focus. It can. And so that's what I want to, so my message to you is kind of two things, right? Mindset and focus. So when we were going through our customer journey, we had to be sure that we stayed focused on the things that really mattered. And those things that really mattered were not an entire universe of information about you guys and, bought from 100 different suppliers of third-party information. We're going to do that where it's smart and makes sense. But we're also not going to lose focus and just try and conquer the world, bowl the ocean, pick your euphemism. It won't work out well most of the time if you head down that path. So this is a little bit of an advice or nugget of information, hopefully, from me. And I think this is what it helps do. And sorry, so I grew up around Ann Arbor. I love Barry Sanders. The guy was amazing. I love this slide because my other lesson learned here is to try and stay nimble. The rate of change at which business moves today is probably an unprecedented, I've seen the scales where, 50 years ago it took this long to change something and, that just moves like this, and now we're at a point where you can hardly even measure that. To keep up with change, you're gonna have to be nimble. And this slide, that's gonna steal focus from you, and it's gonna be hard to be nimble. So in order to keep up with the changing landscape of how people are doing business with us, what information looks like, we try and be sure that we're not ingrained in something so far that we can't move and change and shift, right? So we're so entrenched in something that you can't pull yourself out of it. We've probably all been there too. You've got a platform, you're like, I don't know how we're gonna peel the onion back on this thing to get it to, we gotta make some enhancements. It's tough, it's difficult. I'll say a word that Dan hates, we can't do it, right? Being nimble allows you to be able to sidestep some of that stuff. And it's tough, right? It doesn't come easy, and for us, it meant continually refocusing our efforts. right? Because it wasn't a one and done. We didn't set it and forget it. We didn't say, okay, cool, we got a project plan, it's going to run itself, and on we go. We continually had to focus and make sure that we were doing exactly what we needed to do all the way through the entire project to be sure that we ended up where we needed to be. Because, in something that takes more than a couple of days or weeks, life gets in the way. Other priorities pop up. I'm pretty sure that everybody in this room would tell you that, your business partner doesn't ask you to do one thing for the year. Nobody's in that position, is my guess. They want you to do 1,000 things, right? So balancing that, making sure that you can be nimble, but stay focused, that was something that we took away from that project last year. So, where are we at now? Where we're at now is very different from where we started out. Do we still have households and customers? Absolutely, right? That hasn't changed. But how many are we able to understand, tag, mark? No. Look at, a longitudinal view of them. Almost double of where we were before. So we had a kind of this black box of what we called unknowns. If you came into our store, you had a red shirt on, you hit, the guy behind the counter in our Pulse system said, hey, you know what? Guy in red shirt, that's the order, carry out. That's what was, that's the data we had. It was unknown. So we start filtering that stuff out of analyses and things like that, and all of a sudden, our world shrinks in terms of what we're able to quantify and analyze. So we went way beyond that with these things like customer profiles, emails, phone, address is still in there. So we didn't abandon everything, but we really tried to broaden our scale in terms of what we were looking at and how we considered the definition of a customer. And so on the bottom there, my only kind of tech here on this slide is that for us, Talend is that data integration layer, right? So for 4 seconds, I'll talk about a tool. Talend underpins all of that for us. We move a lot of information around, and we move it very, very quickly, and that's the platform that we use. And we do it because we can be nimble. It's very robust, and it just works. So, having said that, I want to get back to something that Dan touched on, which is why we're here, why we're talking about this, and what this really means to us. So his second slide was our vision, right? Vision to be the #1 pizza company in the world in every neighborhood. And guys, I'm going to tell you, I've been at this company 12 years, and it is absolutely true. You'll see that message up on the walls all over our home office. We make, very specific promises to each other as team members, to our customers. We like to call ourselves not normal. We have pizza sauce running in our veins. It may sound like a PBS after-school special, but I'm here to tell you it is the absolute truth. And for us, that relationship with the customer and all of these channels and the way that we interact with all of you, hopefully, varies. And there's lots of those different things. And at the heart of it is this foundation of an understanding of a unified customer definition. And getting there from where we started to where we wanted to be entailed a lot of change and a lot of mindset differences of where we have been for years. Years before I entered the data warehouse team. It had always been done the same way. So as we have a very, very sharp chief digital officer. And he operates in every one of those circles up there. And not only do we operate in those, we want to be the absolute best because we care about that relationship with you guys more than anything else. And foundationally, if we don't have that information to back that, we're never going to make that relationship as world-class as it can be. So, I actually had retitled that slide. They wanted me to talk about the road ahead. And so I think what you're going to find for us at Domino's Pizza is if we were to get together again in a year, we would be talking about the 4th gen of this, the 5th gen of this. It won't ever stop. It will be continuous investment because we believe it is a foundational pillar of what we do and what makes us or gives us competitive advantage. I think, me personally, I would describe, changes for us being ingesting and processing information even different than we do today, faster, more real-time, more synchronous, and then turning around and activating stuff based on that information in a whole lot faster capacity. So if we can take this information and make your experience on one of our platforms, whether it be in the store or online, or the next whiz-bangadry thing that I don't even, that the guys in e-com have come up with yet, that's what we're going to do. So innovation will be an area, I think, that you'd see us talking about 12 months, a year, 2 years, 3 years down the road, because that's who we are. In our DNA, that's who we are. So on behalf of Dan, myself, Fred DeLetter, who's also in our group, thanks for hanging with us Friday afternoon at 4:15. Hopefully I didn't put too many of you to sleep, and I think we've maybe got some time for Q&A. Cool?
That was good.
Sure. Okay, can you tell me your name just so I know, who we're... Henry. What's up, Henry? So the question is, based on the consumer information that we're getting, does it today affect what you see as you're on our commerce platform? So I guess the answer I'd give you is yes, to a degree. So what Dan described was we do a lot of A/B testing.
Right.
So we take, Henry, we give you one version of our e-commerce, online experience, and then we give, somebody like Kurt a different one, and then we would see how you'd react through that order funnel.
Yeah, I would say it's not necessarily the food, it's the offer. It's the experience, but it's also understanding that we've listened to you, we understand what you're looking for, and we better service you the next time you and I or you and the system interact. Right? So we're really focused around drawing you into the experience. Now, ultimately, there's other avenues where information is going to modify our product. We have different avenues that we pursue to get feedback, customer feedback on how to modify and change our product, right? But more importantly, I guess our mission here and our vision is it's really leveraging big data to interact with you directly. The question was, there was an interest as to how we are applying the information that we learn into modifying our product. And I'll answer it a couple of ways. One, I think one thing we're not is gimmicky, right? We won't create the product of the week. We won't create the product of the month. That changes our quality. It changes the way we interact with you and the experience that you receive, right? We may tailor our offer, and we present you with certain offers that will, entice you, but ultimately, we're not going to modify our product unless we have a consortium that says we need to, right? So there's a different vehicle for that. What we do, I almost pulled the Bernie Sanders. What we do is, we'll in essence tailor our transaction with you, right? And that's really what's important to us, and at least in our big data space, right?
Could you speak a little bit to any of the cultural challenges you've had as you've worked through the organization from a data perspective? And then secondly, how do you prioritize and fund your projects?
Cultural in kind of what sense?
Cultural in the sense of how are you working, when you're working with the business groups to bring them different data than maybe they realized in the context of the way they've been operating in. So any cultural change that you've seen and challenges and how you've worked through that, and then your prioritization and then funding of those projects.
I think we started as an us versus them, right? It's IT versus everybody. Everybody's not effective, IT is, right? What dawned on us is we were wrong, right? So culturally, one of the things that we had to do is say, that's probably not the approach. Nobody wanted to talk to us, and we're pretty nice people. It's just that we had nothing that was attractive to them in terms of use case. So immediately what we had to do was, there was a little bit of an org change management on both sides, right? We had to come to an agreement as to how we were going to map through this together. And really drive, first it was timelines, right? We have to understand what we want to deliver. Then it was, obviously, we want to spend money associated to what we need to deliver. And then it was rallying around, you have to start with data. You can't start with analytics. You can, but if you don't have any data, you got some really cool models that tell you nothing, right? So it was an incubator of collaboration with regards to how do we want to work with our consumers effectively, one. So two, your other question was, I think it was around investment associated to going forward. So traditional IT budget process at Domino's about 4.5 years ago was, how many servers were we going to buy? How many laptops were we going to buy? And you know what, we need some storage, let's go get some storage, right? We actually flipped that model so much so where we partner with marketing on projects and then budget solutions tied to those projects effectively. So it's one project that's got a marketing initiative, a technology initiative, and the investment is coupled together, right? I've got a stakeholder on one side of the business. I'm the stakeholder in terms of the delivery aspect of it, and we partner in methodologies through the budgeting process for the following year. What we don't do is buy stuff for the sake of buying stuff, right? My boss won't let us do that. I probably won't let Cliff do that. But more importantly, if I can't buy it and leverage it, then it sits on a shelf. So investment for us is really through the life cycle of a project all the way through into delivery. It's hard for me to go say, you know what, Cliff, I read this article about X, let's go buy X, without incorporating the perspective of how the analytics team would benefit from it, how my operations team would benefit from it, how my franchisee would benefit from it, so on and so forth. Right, so we've actually have, which is unique, we've got 1 foot in the marketing operations space and 1 foot in the IT space. And we've actually forged relationships to drive the rest of the organization to actually have a toe, because that's all they'll give us, a toe into the IT space, right?
The other thing that I think is pretty cool that came out of our last budgeting session is we have a very sharp CFO. And when Dan came back from our first round of budgets, he said, Jeff wants us to talk about budgeting differently. It's not all, it's just not costs and, it costs this much to do this and it costs this much to do Y. It's really about investment and where are we choosing to invest. Because we've got lots of ways we can go spend money. But the way that we want and where we want to invest is really, really important. And again, it's another mindset change, I think, for us is that we're not just going to look at things as costs, but as strategic investments. Good question.
Yeah, it's also, IT drives revenue in the organization, right? We have a profit and loss center that we actually retain dollars on in terms of innovation. So it's a little easier, where I recognize most organizations, IT sometimes isn't necessarily viewed as driving value at all times, right? I've been on both sides of the fence. I will tell you this is a much better side. But ultimately, it's really, again, and I spoke about the relationships tied to what you're trying to accomplish versus what bright and shiny object you're pursuing.
Well, let's thank our presenters
Thank you,
here.
guys. Thank you.